Colosio. Welcome to the UAP channel. Yes, check out the snazzy new graphics that I have available for your viewing enjoyment. Okay, enough acting like a radio voice. I'm just enjoying my new microphone. I hope you are. It's actually not a new microphone, but I got it hooked up and working, which is just amazing. Here, I'll try to talk like a typical, like, popular YouTuber of 2018. Since we're kind of closing out, I can make fun of 2018. You know, they overreact to whatever it is they see. So this picture that pops up is the most amazing picture I've ever seen in my entire life. And then there's something that they're not sure if they like or dislike or are more likely indifferent of. They'll say, that's just the worst thing I've ever seen in my life, but I love it. All right, so, okay, now I'm going to start talking about what we're dealing with here. Okay, so I did this on Google Earth, but the Google Earth version that I have available doesn't show things well enough. And so I'm taking this footage is from a channel that I'll put in the description box. It's John Levi, and it's an excellent channel. And what is shown here is Las Vegas, but the housing bust can explain much of this being unbuilt, and you know how they'll lay out a development and then it hasn't yet been built, or somebody owns the land, so they have like pathways and like irrigation canals or tracks where they ride their four-wheelers or whatever, where they're going to plan a subdivision. But as you know, or as you don't know, the Agenda 21, all the population reduction, women don't have kids like they used to. And the ones that do have children don't have as many. And we also have many abortions, and it's just starting to take effect in earnest. But it began around the mid-2000s. So around 2005, we had the housing bust with the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. That's where they just couldn't hide it anymore, that so many homes were being vacant. But before then, I remember homes used to be built a lot. There were a lot of new homes. You always saw new homes going up. But for, 10 years now, I haven't seen many new homes built. And I think that the population reduction is so extreme that they're actually clearing out entire neighborhoods, and vacant homes are being bulldozed all the time. And they're never going to be replaced. And now we have whole towns going down like Paradise. I'll be surprised if it is ever the same. Of course, they can pack it in and make it look like, oh, well, now it's way more populated, but all they did was transfer a bunch of people in there with stack them and pack them housing, where you're living like an ant in an ant farm or something, and nobody wants that. There's tons of land in the United States, and the United States is certainly not the biggest land in the world. But if you look at this, look at all these, that's a whole city. And it goes on and on and on. When I saw this, it blew my mind. Las Vegas times 8, by my reckoning, is perfectly laid out. And it's to the point that I thought, well, this has to be some kind of auto-generated, like, city planning kind of program or something that just kind of lays that out. But I think this is a historical actual city, like the Native Americans. And it was civilized, and it's laid out exactly like you would lay out a subdivision. There was never a city there that I know of, or that anybody knows of, as far as I know of. But we're talking about Nevada, we're talking about Las Vegas, the surrounding area, but get this, it goes on and on and on. It goes all the way down into New Mexico, and I covered half the state of New Mexico, and where there are high mountains and things, it doesn't show up, but in these lower areas, it shows up. And just look at this. There's nothing there. I mean, there's no street view. There's no actual roads there. They're just ghosts of a city that once was. And it might be 100 years old. It might be 500 years old. It might be 1,000 years old. I don't know. Nobody knows. It might be Roman civilization for all we know. And some of it gets used. It's really interesting how some of it just kind of suddenly gets used, and then it kind of looks like it's in disuse. And you go through the decades, and that's why I'm using this video, because the Google Earth version that I have available to me that works for recording. I can't do that. But that's what really, I thought, well, I don't know, but then when I watched this video by John Levi, I saw him going through time, with the slider in the top left where you go, over 10 years, well, like 30 years back you can, and it's all airplane images, and there are airports everywhere. Look at that. When you sit down and think about it, every little town has a municipal airport, and when you look for it, not only do you find all of those that are active that you know of, that are reported, there are some that are just visible on the map that are active that you didn't know of that aren't reported. They don't have the 3-letter code or anything like that, but they're there. It's just for, like recreational or, like medevac or something like that. Ostensibly, yeah, we don't know, but it's there. But then you look where there shouldn't be an airport. There's no airport. There's not even a town. There never was a town, and you'll find an airport, like you just saw a minute ago, and it's insane. Why? Whose airport? There was never a town there. Who's flying planes? How long have planes been around? I don't know. And a lot of these things are government lands. Of course, almost everything in the West, over half the land, is government-owned land, which is an outrage. I mean, that's such of a far cry from the Teddy Roosevelt, we got to preserve Yosemite and Yellowstone and da-da-da. Okay, fine. I mean, there are reasons, sure. But the Grand Canyon is huge. And there's just so much land out there. It's insane. And it's insane how much of it is government owned. But when you look at it, it's insane how much of it seems to have once had cities. Now, this is a firing test range, and I showed it before. But this subject is so fascinating to me. I'm entirely convinced that this test range is, because this is the most tightly packed, densely packed metropolis with the thickest foundations under each building and a massive underground network and everything that they simply, it just would be too much to cover up, too much to demolish in a traditional sense. And so they needed a place probably to blow off some bombs and things, of course. But this area is huge. And the way that they just blast these craters so evenly and widespread is a little bit suspect. A lot of the bomb testing and stuff can be done in the open ocean. They have entire huge islands all over the place where they do this stuff too. And it's, this is Area 51 supposedly. This is what it is. But the fact that he does drag the slide around, this is a covered up thing, of course, but when he does drag the slide around, the translucencies and the things that show up reveals quite a bit of structure, and some of it could be underground tunneling. When you build a tunnel underground, if it's not really deep, it does eventually have a way of showing through from overhead photography. I don't know the extent of that personally. I just know it as a fact. And I showed that before with Central Park. When you show Central Park, how you can tell there were structures there. Of course, they say that there were structures in Central Park before it was well, if you can call it constructing, it's demolishing. But they acted like, well, there was just a bunch of shanties and lean-tos in Central Park in New York City, Manhattan, before that. And they had to clear out the area of the dregs of society that were living there. Well, that may have all been true at that point, but they had torn down some major buildings and they weren't photographed well, but I did see some of them in the background. They were massive and they didn't look so shabby. They looked like exposition buildings, as far as I could tell, if they were where Central Park was located. But those buildings were kind of reduced to rubble pretty early on for whatever reason. And that's a pattern throughout cities that they do that. And some people might think, well, the Central Park area, well, that's the crummiest, the central city, that's the crummiest part. No. That's more of a recent notion. The central city areas, they're like in Europe, it's that way now, but around most of the world, it has been for almost all the time, that the downtown central area, of course, makes sense that that would be the best area. And it's happening again in America with the revitalization and everything. You know, the war on drugs and all that nonsense of the, yeah, all that drug cartel type stuff, whatever they did in the central city, that kind of ruined the downtowns and all that, is kind of going by the wayside. It's an aberration as far as history. But yeah, some of these are power line things, and some of these are like park ranger access, patrol roads and hiking trails. But my gosh, you cover this huge, vast expanse, and you still have all these roads. It's just amazing how. Now, if they were just trails, it wouldn't be such a big thing, because trails out there, when you make a trail, like with these Nazca lines and stuff, it doesn't change. It's not like there's no vegetation. It's not like that where it'll be overgrown. If you lay a pile of stones in a line or something, it'll show up for hundreds of years at least. It's not going to be overgrown with cacti and whatnot. But the way it's laid out, it's not like these Nazca lines and all this fanciful artwork that could only be seen by something that can fly. It's quite obviously like city grids and stuff like that. Now there are some of those. Okay, I didn't notice it before, but again, I'm watching it with you. I'm just amazed it's just the more you look, the more you find. And it is like a rabbit hole. You go down, it's more like an ant hill opening, because you just go down and it goes all different directions. It just keeps going and going and going. It does kind of look like the Nazca lines. And the Nazca lines, you know how they say, oh, it was kind of like it was an airport-ish type thing and all that stuff. Well, it does kind of look that way. I mean, I always dismiss that, because it was associated with something ridiculous, which was the ancient aliens theories and all that stuff. And that is ridiculous to me. It totally is. But, yeah, all these, and some of these things that are considered as bomb craters may not actually be bomb craters. And they're not meteor craters either. None of them are, that I know of. I'm not saying there can't be rocks falling from the sky, but I don't think they're meteors, not in the sense that we've been taught, if they are, but there isn't a lot of that going on. They could just be sinkholes. And sinkholes can form for any number of reasons, and they can form anywhere, because we've had a worldwide flood. So what would you expect, right? What would you expect? But yeah, I put this on here because I think it needs to be documented. These types of things, when you find it, you really do have to record it, because you want to preserve this history, since it's been proven already in the case of Google's fog and the curvature, where they add all that stuff in to hide the fact that you can see farther than you should be allowed to see if the curvature existed. So then they added in the fog layer, which I'm told it can be removed, but I haven't found a way to remove it so you can have a direct line of sight. And the earth.nullschool.net, the AE projection map of the weather in real time and all that stuff, and the data and everything, that got covered up, that got scrubbed and buried. So all we have is the archive data, and we're hoping, there are other versions that are kind of starting to pop up. I heard, I haven't seen it yet. But yeah, all this entire city after city, it's like in Star Wars, that whole planet city, where the entire planet is a huge city. That's almost what like the West is like. I mean, we're talking, if all this were, if you just think of it's all inhabited at one point, my gosh, that blows away the East Coast population today. That's the scale of it. That's how massive it is. I'm telling you, it's insane. Look at all this big sand dune here. I'm starting to wonder if like the Dust Bowl wasn't to kind of cover up some of this stuff, if it isn't somewhat artificial, all that dust blowing around, you know, it was real. I think it was real. But at any rate, I'll cut this video here pretty soon. But yeah, it's just amazing to me that these structures, these features, whatever they are, and then what they're covered up by sometimes is very interesting. You know, it looks like this to me looked like a Titan. And so I drew it out. Uh, maybe a woman. But we do see that a lot. There was one marked as a national security monument. And it, you know, the area in the Grand Canyon out not too far from where this is located, they have this whole place that is basically like ancient Egypt in almost every way. And so it's just fascinating because we have no idea who lived there and these entire civilizations and what happened. It could just be the antediluvian people. And this I thought looked like muscle. I mean, it looks like a page out of the anatomy book, you know. And, you know, then the shape and where the bones are, there's a lot of lime, and where the blood is, of course, then there's a lot of iron. And it's quite fascinating. Titans. Okay.